Mr. Murray.
Chairman Pierce, board members, thank you for the opportunity to speak. I am Dr. Darren Murray. I'm an adjunct or part-time professor at Loyola Marymount University in Los Angeles.
I'm sorry for not calling you doctor.
Not a problem. I'm here on behalf of SEIU to provide the perspective of an employee who has recently experienced a organizing campaign at our university. In December of 2013, the union filed a petition on behalf of part-time faculty like myself. There were approximately 450 people in our unit. There was not a stipulation as to exactly what the bargaining unit would be, and some confusion about that. There was a hearing on December 27th where the university proposed including what are called fieldwork supervisors into our bargaining unit, a number of people that may have been upwards of 200 folks. Up to that point, I had never heard of these employees. I had never met one of them. I didn't know who or what they were. Later on, I learned that they supervised student teachers as part of the credentialing process. They're professionals working primarily in secondary school settings. They're not actually located on our campus. Many of them are in San Francisco as part of the Teach for America program. They do not actually teach classes. They do not appear in the schedule of classes. I didn't know who they were. They're paid a per student rate for the folks that they supervise. In this hearing, my colleague Eric Greenberg attended that hearing. The provost and the dean of the School of Education argued that they don't have to, or according to Eric Greenberg, that they don't have to hold office hours just like our adjunct faculty don't have to hold office hours, which surprised me because that was completely inaccurate. Anyhow, the board decided that we did share a community of interest. I don't think that was a well-informed decision, but it was the decision that was made. The contested group of fieldwork supervisors was more than 20% of our bargaining unit, so we would have needed a hearing either under the current rules or under the proposed rules before the election. Under the proposed rules, Loyola Marymount University would have been required to give the union a list of these names of fieldwork supervisors before the hearing. That would have made it much easier for us to find those workers since they didn't even appear in the schedule of classes. But when we went to the hearing, we didn't know who they were or where they were, and that made it hard for us to inform the attorneys and the board about whether they really were part of our community of interest, and it made it awfully hard for us to find them, to get them to sign cards or tell them our side of the story and talk about our working conditions. In terms of educating people on working conditions as a professional educator, it may take years in order to understand some of your lawyering stuff, but in terms of understanding my working conditions, pretty straightforward. I've had my career to do that. And in terms of looking around and seeing what other unionized faculty have, pretty straightforward, pretty easy to do that, and the arguments are pretty clear. I'm also an employee of the California State University. They've been represented by the California Faculty Association for quite a few years now. I've seen the direct benefits that unionization has provided to my colleagues on that campus. The working conditions between the California State University and Loyola Marymount University are frankly stark. I wanted to speak to my employees. I wanted to talk to them about those differences in working conditions. The current conditions, the way this election was run, limited my ability to share those experiences because we didn't even know who was in our bargaining unit. The university had complete and unabated access to that group of employees. It's not fair that we weren't afforded the same opportunity. We should have the same access to free speech as our employer does. The current rules didn't allow for that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Murray, if I may, and I'll preface this by saying I don't think that we deal with any issues that involve absolutes. So this is, many moving parts. But, the one thing I gather from your comments is that it would have been helpful to have information earlier regarding the identities of people in those job classifications. Is it correct? Another thing that you believe is that those field service employees had their own right to be educated by you and by the other union supporters in connection with information that they didn't even know was important to their interests. And that kind of operates both ways.
Sure.
And you know, one way that we can deal with that deals with notification, and we've had some other interesting proposals about that. You know, would you agree that the total time frame available, and you know, there are competing interests all around, but you know, one part of the you know, kind of hollow tube that has moving parts is the available time frame does affect many of these issues. And would you agree or disagree with the overall goal of trying to make sure there's enough time for the important stuff to get done, but not too much time to permit too much mischief to get done? I don't know if we can apply that standard, but
I'll leave the moving parts to people that are in a far higher pay grade than myself. All I know is that had we had that list of names, it wouldn't have taken long to be able to get that get a hold of them. I know this afternoon we're talking more about the voter list and what's on those voter lists, and I'll be back to talk about that a little more. I don't necessarily need a long time to go to folks and say, look, here are working conditions at Loyola Marymount. Here are my working conditions at California State University, Northridge. Here are the significant differences. If you'd like, I can give you that speech in about 10 minutes. So it doesn't require a protracted period to do that. I just need to have the access.
But isn't communication an iterative process in the sense of you actually have to communicate and an audience, and they may flip back and forth? There may be a lot of interesting things to talk about during a campaign.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay.
And I enjoy those conversations, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they have to be protracted to be iterative or generative or constitutive.
So
Or all three.
Your point basically is that had you had the information, time would not have been the factor.
Not the major factor, and certainly not a 30-day period or 3 45-minute sessions or whatever else. You know, we're capable of getting information out, reading stuff, being fairly efficient about that, making our points. I don't think we would have needed an exceptionally long period of time in order to do that.
And Dr. Murray, just out of my personal curiosity, what's your area of academic expertise?
Communication studies.
Oh, great, thank you.
So you're wait a second.
So Dr. Murray is an expert in communication.
Right.
studies.
I just want to make sure that's clear. So you're an expert in communicating. And you don't need 30
I purport
days.
to be occasionally.
All right.
As an expert in communication studies, you're saying that that length of time is not required.
I don't think it's particularly necessary for a protracted period. Yes.
Well, since you're here as an expert in communication studies, have there been any such studies on the amount of time it takes for people to absorb a, let's just say, not simplistic set of facts that might be going on in any sort of election campaign?
I don't think there's going to be a study that provides a one-size-fits-all answer to that particular question. I think it would be terribly contextually based on the audience, on the information, and all sorts of factors. So I'm not aware of any studies, although you've given me an idea for one that if you can find me something might advance my career a bit. So get me out of the adjunct pool into something that is tenured. So
If you're back in
we can talk about that.
Right.
Absolutely.
If you're back in another 3 years on this, just please have that study completed. But to be more serious here, just for a moment, because this is interesting to me. If we don't have any data, don't you think free speech is an important enough value that we shouldn't jump in and then impose a bright line that's going to cut that down?
I'm not saying we don't have any data. I'm saying I'm not necessarily familiar with what data is available. Maybe we can get a researcher on that one to see what's in that body of literature. But you know, I wouldn't imagine that a reasonable time frame, and the time frames that I'm hearing about, I don't think the unions are proposing that we have an instantaneous election before we've had the chance to even talk to folks. But I'm not looking at 30 and 60 and 90 days as being a time frame that is really necessary to understand the issues.
Okay, that's your personal opinion, right?
Sure.
we reserve the right to recall you and to continue this hearing
Absolutely.
to the extent necessary. No, really, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Murray.
Thank you.